In this video, we're going to find what's called the difference quotient, and then we're going to start looking at some business applications, starting with the cost function. Before we dive right into what's called the difference quotient, let's review from the last video how to evaluate functions. We're given this quadratic function, and we're asked to find f of a plus h minus f of a. Let's take this in two parts. The first part is how to find f of a plus h. Well, hopefully you recall from the last lesson that wherever there is an x, we're going to replace that with a plus h. So we have 4 minus a plus h squared. Please notice that I put the a plus h in parentheses, and that's going to help me again remind myself of order of operations, and that I need to square this first before I subtract. So squaring something means to multiply it by itself. We can't just say that a plus h equals a squared plus h squared. That is very wrong. Please don't do that. How do we do it correctly? We're going to distribute a times a times h. H times a, I'm just going to write that in alphabetical order, and then h times h. Those are like terms. And I used a bracket there, but a parenthesis, any kind of grouping symbol to remind myself the last thing I do is distribute that minus sign. So I have 4 minus a squared minus 2ah and minus h squared. So that is step one. The second part I'm going to do is I'm going to find f of a. So f of a is really easy because I'm just going to put an a in place of x. Now, what does it ask me to do? It asks me to subtract these two things. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of draw a line, and I need to subtract this, which means I need to change the signs, add the opposite. So that's 0, that's 0, and now I just have minus 2ah minus h squared. Now you don't have to do it in two parts. A lot of people just do it in one big long line, but I just wanted to show you step by step. Now we're going to really get to what's called the difference quotient. Believe it or not, this is the slope of a line. I know it's kind of weird looking, but as we get into the lessons within chapter 2 and 3, you're going to see where this is going to be needed. So we have this formula. No, you don't need to memorize it. And part of the formula says, hey, I'm dividing by h, and this part just says I'm not dividing by 0. Recall in the last lesson, we were talking about that rational function, how you can never divide by 0. So again, this is the formula. You don't need to memorize it. So let's take it again step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do is find f of a plus h. And again, everywhere there is an x, I'm filling in with a plus h. I'm using my parentheses again to be careful. So just like on the last problem, I'm going to multiply that together. I'm not going to show my steps this time. I just know it is this result. I'm going to go ahead and distribute my minus here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is distribute my 3. My second part is to find f of a, and again, that's probably the easiest part, but I'm going to line it up so I know I have 3a squared, and then I'm going to have minus a plus 1. And what am I going to do with that? I'm going to subtract it. So just lining it up kind of helps me keep it straight. So I'm going to have 6ah plus 3h squared, that's 0, minus a. Oh, look at my mistake. I forgot to subtract that 1. I really didn't see it way over there. And of course that's 0. And then the last step we're going to do is we're going to divide by h. How do you divide by h? There's a couple of different ways. You can separate all of them. That's one way, and I want to show you that way. And then you could reduce. So those h's cancel. One of those cancels. And then this is not 0, but subtracting 1, h divided by h. I kind of really like that method. Kind of helps you not get too fast on just scratching out some h's. And this is your final answer. This is what we would call the difference quotient, or we have done what the problem asks us to do. Now this is just another problem, but I want you to see that it has an x cubed. So we're going to have to cube a plus h. So I want to kind of do that now. So I have a plus h cubed. That's what that means. We already know what happens when we multiply a plus h times a plus h. We get a squared plus 2ah plus h squared. But now I have to multiply that again by a plus h. So I need to distribute. I'm going to distribute my a to all of those. Then I need to distribute my h to all of those. So I have, let's see, I'm just going to put in alphabetical order to help me keep up with it. So I have plus 2ah squared plus h cubed. Certainly there's some like terms somewhere in there. So I have an a cubed, have a 2a squared h, and a 1a squared h, ah squared and 2ah squared. I believe that makes 3ah squared. And then I have that lone h cubed. So that is how you cube that out. Thankfully, we will not have to be doing that very often. All right, so let's go back to this. F of a plus h equals 2 times a plus h cubed minus a plus h plus 1. So I'm going to have 2, and then I'm going to take my result. I'm going to distribute my minus sign. Now I'm going to distribute my 2. And wow, okay, what's the next thing I need to do? I need to subtract f of a. Okay, so subtracting it, change sign, change sign, change sign. So that's going to be 0. I have 6a squared h plus 6ah squared plus 2h cubed minus h. And then the last step is to divide everything by h. So if I do that individually, I would have this divided by h, which would leave us 6a squared. This divided by h would leave me 6ah. This divided by h would be 2h squared. And again, actually I need to loop in that negative. That's going to be minus 1. So not hard, just kind of tedious. The second thing we want to look at is the total cost function. We're going to be looking at cost and profit and revenue throughout this whole course. It is a business calculus class. So let's look at this example. It says the total cost function is the variable cost function plus a fixed one. Now if you think about that, that's real life. Your fixed cost function would be, you had to buy the building, there's rent, things like that. Fixed might be your labor costs may go up and down, maybe your air conditioning prices went up and down, just different things vary. So let's see, this manufacturer of water filters has a fixed cost of $10,000 a month, or just $10,000, and a variable cost according to this where X denotes the number of water filters manufactured. So what's my total cost function? You know what? I'm going to call it C for cost. So my total cost function is the variable plus the fixed. So they gave me my variable one plus my fixed cost of $10,000. So that is my cost function. The next thing says find the total cost incurred in producing 30,000 filters. So that means I have to evaluate this cost function at $30,000. Or 30,000. Keep saying dollars. Wishful thinking. Okay, so this is when you really need to get out a calculator. So I'm going to grab mine. This is negative 90,000. This is going to be, I think that's 300,000. And that's 10,000. So now again, just using my calculator just to make sure, and I get a total cost of 220,000. And that is dollars because that is my cost. So it's going to cost me that much to make 30,000 water filters. Hopefully they're really good water filters. When you run a business, you're interested in profit, right? You want to make money. So your profit is your revenue, like how much money you're bringing in, you're selling these, minus what it cost you to make them. So again, we're going to be seeing that throughout the course. So this same manufacturer has a revenue given by this function. So what's the total profit function? All right, so my profit function is my revenue minus my cost. What was my cost function? Remember, this was our cost function, so we want to subtract that. Okay, so I've got my revenue minus my cost, and I want to go ahead and clean that up by distributing this minus sign. And let's see, do I have any like terms? I believe I do. Those are both x squares. And that's going to be negative 0.0004 x squared. 20x minus 10x is 10x, and then we have minus $10,000. 10,000, sorry. So what is the profit when the level of production is 10,000 filters per month? So that means I want to evaluate my profit at 10,000. Okay, so again, calculator comes in handy. So I'm going to reach for mine and I'm going to plug that part in. That's going to be negative 40,000. So this is going to be 100,000. I know, a lot of zeros. And hopefully, if I've not missed any zeros, my profit on 10,000 filters is $50,000. So again, you're going to be asked a lot about a cost function, a revenue, profit, things like that. And one thing you should know throughout this course is that your profit is your revenue, how much money you take in, minus how much money it costs you to manufacture whatever you were making. And hopefully that makes sense. We also looked at what's called the difference quotient, which is this right here. We'll be using that quite extensively through this chapter and the next, so make sure you've got that down.